All right. It is 5:31, and I call this meeting officially to order. Thank you for the heads up, Terry. She won't be here next week. Let's get on to roll call. There's Bjorn, me, Brandon, Deanna, Greg, Joey, Jess, Josh, Lacey, Peggy, Sean, Terry, and Zoe. And Messina and Eunice are absent today. All right, and can I entertain a motion to approve today's meeting, or agenda, excuse me. Motion by Bjorn, any second?
Second.
Seconded by Brandon. And the motion passes. And can I entertain a motion to approve last meeting's minutes? Motion by Bjorn. Any second?
I second.
Seconded by Josh. All right, thank you. And the motion passes. Okay, on to reports. I don't think I have anything to report for you guys this week, so I'll yield my time over to Brandon.
Everyone, just have a quick report. It's more of an update. I know a couple weeks back I said ASCWU was in preparation of doing the CCI request, kind of to follow up after we had the architect request back in the fall. However, we've heard more about the governor's budget being released, and so we're more looking for different solutions before coming to the committee for a request. So chances are it probably won't be this year's board who will see the request, and it probably won't be this year's ASCWU board who will be making that request, just to be completely transparent and open with you all. But this summer, the onboarding ASCWU board will be working with admin, figuring out solutions to kind of cover more of that operational ongoing cost for phase A and for the CCI. Then they'll probably be coming to S&A. So if any of you are interested as returning students to be on S&A, there's a little sneak peek that maybe next year they'll have a pretty cool supplemental request coming down the line and to talk about and assess and suggest up to, the president and the board of trustees. So it won't be this year. However, this current board is still working on formulating that package. So next year's board, next year's student body president can come here and present it. So yeah, for you all, if that was stressing you out, good news. And then, also unfortunate news that it's being delayed a couple more months. But with that, I yield my time to Joey and Lacey.
The only brief things I have, just a reminder, we have this week's meeting and then 2 more meetings next week. And then we do have a gap for source, and then our last meeting on the 26th. We do already have agenda items scheduled for the rest. So we will keep busy all the way up until the end, as you'll see within this. The only other 2 things, and one, I'm going to be reminding you all of this every week for the next 3 weeks, is if you are returning, we'd love to have you all back. So definitely keep an eye out for that, or feel free to reach out, and this is in advance, but to Joffrey, who's the incoming exec VP, to let him know. But also, whether you're returning or not, definitely help to spread the word out to any students or friends and things who are gonna be here next year. Because really, you all are gonna be the best advocates for what the work is that we do on this committee, because a lot of students have no idea what it is, or when you just read the description. And again, if any of you go back and read the description of the S&A committee, you'll see that it seems very straightforward and like it's just dealing with budgets and really not hearing the types of requests and being as involved as we really are. So definitely please help to spread the word so we can get a good group of candidates for next year. And then the only other part is just an update, just so you know, that we started with Brandon, Lacey, and myself meeting with Geoffrey this morning just to kind of start the onboarding process. So he's aware, is invited to come in. He's been to some of our meetings in the past, but just in preparation for this summer planning, but also for next year. So just to make you all aware.
Great. I don't really have a report, but I just want to remind everybody that it's been a little while since we've seen a supplemental request. And so today we are going to have a presentation, but just as a reminder, we actually had previously set the budget at $250,000. And there was one request that we had approved, which was at $35,000 for the CCI project. And so that leaves about $215,000 in this year's supplemental. So I just want to kind of give a reminder, since it's definitely been a long time since we've seen one.
All right, thank you, Lacey. And then moving forward, communications received. I believe we got one back from the international office, right?
Yeah, we actually had two different. So one was in the initial packet of information from international yesterday that I had sent out, which was in response to one of the first questions. And then I sent a separate email this morning because there was an additional question that was sent there that they were responding back. So you can see both of those two communications. You all should have access to it in preparation for the deliberation coming up. We did have another one that I know the students on the committee all received this, but just to share with the rest of the committee, that we did receive communication from ASCWU that the Service Activities Fee Committee for this year has been awarded the ASCW Committee of the Year for this academic year. And I'm just going to read the brief blurb so that way it's on the record and people can see. This award identifies an exceptional committee that is chaired by a student for your group's dedication to ensuring equity on campus. We want to highlight the hard work this committee has put into supporting the student body this year. So that is going to be coming up. There'll be a virtual recognition on May 20th at 6 p.m. with the ASCW's end of the year celebration. And so again, I know that went out to the student committee members because that's who had received it, but definitely, I know I'm biased, but a well-deserved award for this group. You all have done a great job. So congrats on that. And that is all the communications.
All right, thank you. Moving on, let's go on to public comments. Any questions, comments, or concerns? I'll check the chat real quick. All right, seeing none, let's move on to old business, and that is with the International Student Activities and Outreach request. Any opening remarks on that item? Brandon, did I see your hand up?
No, not yet. Just seeing if anyone else wanted to talk.
All right. Any opening remarks? Bjorn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, we got the org chart earlier today, and I just wanted a brief clarification from Joey or Lacey. It denotes 148 and 522 funds, and we fall under 148, correct? And then the self-support, okay.
So it's actually opposite. So we are 522 funds, and then their self-support, other revenue sources is 148.
Okay, so we'd be supporting 4 to 6 student program assistants, and then potentially funding a student worker. All right, that makes sense to me.
Joey, I see your hand up.
And just as a reminder, because I know this was 2 weeks ago, that this is a request to keep the 5,000 and change carry forward. It's really not changing what their base funding is going towards already, because with the base funding they receive is going towards those positions. If I remember from the presentation, it's affording them the ability, if there's additional hours that they could do, but also to do some increased programming going into next year when we bring people back. So there wouldn't necessarily be a change to any of the staffing from what I recall. We can look back at it, but it's really to provide those added pieces to make up for the fact they couldn't do programming this year with the remote pieces and some of those, or that they weren't able to do some of the same program. They did do some programming still, but so just as a reminder, this is not to add or anything new. It's to give them the ability to use those remaining funds to expand some of the programs they're already doing.
Any more comments? Bjorn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems in line with what their previous request was, so I don't see why not to grant them this rollover.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I'd just say I'm in agreement with Bjorn, mainly knowing that this will be going probably towards increased funding efforts, which is probably, you know, what they were hoping to do before COVID. So to me, it makes sense and it's consistent with the request. I just guess move, you know, I guess I make a motion to approve the full amount and give them just like a timeline of 1 year to spend it on, you know, their intended purposes.
All right, and Bjorn, is that a second, I see? All right, seconded by Bjorn. Any discussion before we vote? Let me check the chat. All right, seeing none, I call the vote. And the motion passes to approve the funding request. Up next, we have the S&A base funding process review and recommendations.
And so this is one we touched on last week, and really this is open to you all at this point. The document that was sent out, again, the week before, really is a chance. I mean, I'd still like you all to fill that out on your own if you would like, especially if anyone doesn't want to publicly share their comments and discussion. But knowing how this committee works, that a lot of it is open and public, and that you all do a great job of bouncing ideas and kind of adding off of each other with that. I really did want to just provide this as a chance for us to talk through this. Again, it's not a requirement. I'd still like you all to submit them if you want anonymously to me afterwards. But again, just to go through the document, and I'll just kind of ask each question, leave it open for any discussion as we go into it. But again, the questions are really on here, and I'll say them all and then come back. But what have been some of the successes of the committee this year from your individual perspective? And then we'll go into what are the challenges and then recommendations. And so I guess I'd start off with, for each of you, what do you all feel have been some of the successes of the committee this year? And again, some of you are new, some of you have been here before, and so definitely want to get a variety of responses to that.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
I mean, we had 9 hours of deliberation and we came out more or less intact. So, and we put in all the work before that to prepare. So that's definitely an achievement, I think.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I think a big success for us is just the onboarding process that this committee has. I don't think many committees like properly prepare for like the type of, I guess, work that goes ahead. So I think more the advisors work, but how we like had that timeline of, or like the fall was like training, business was done, winter and spring quarter. To me, that worked well.
Any more thoughts? Yeah, if I could say something, I think everyone always asks very important questions with different requests, like if it aligns with the policies, like where it's going, and all the questions were very very good, and it helped us make a more informed decision. So I think that's more of an individual thing on everyone, but as a group, that was great. I think that was a very big success.
Absolutely agree. And again, you all can think through these and we can bounce back, but I know you all have the chance to fill these out individually. So, I mean, I guess I jump to the conversely with that. What do you all feel have been some of the challenges for the committee this year in your perspective?
Bjorn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I mean, as commendable as it is that we went through the 9-hour deliberation, it was also extremely difficult for us, like very taxing emotionally and sometimes physically. So that was something that was definitely something we had to overcome.
Any other comments? Terry, go ahead.
I think a lot kind of along the lines with what Bjorn just said. I think trying to decide that amount of money in one quarter, especially coming at the end of the quarter for the students, is really stressful. So I think it just strikes me that just putting a lot of stress at that particular point in time. I think the other thing that I would say is the way the process is, it doesn't allow for any kind of feedback and review of when you make the decision. And I guess one of the things that I was going to suggest is to have a systematic review based on equity. And so, for instance, this committee, if you look under the, sorry, I'm terrible at this. Is it the policies? I think it's the policies of the committee. There's the whole thing. There's like, for instance, there's supposed to be students from all the colleges. There's supposed to be a grad student. There's supposed to be a non-traditional student. So if you just started from there and said, are we doing, after we make our decisions, is this equitable? Are we dividing the money up in an equitable fashion? And I think adding some kind of systematic review for both the base funding budget. Yes, thank you, Bjorn. The base funding budget and the supplemental budgets on an annual basis would be helpful.
I know Peggy is taking minutes, but I'm also quickly jotting down this feedback too.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, going off of what Terry said, I mean, I spent a long time after the deliberation talking to people who were not able to stay angry at me for longer than about 5 minutes, but still, I mean, we had like 130 people come to the deliberation because they were completely blindsided. And I think that one thing it might be worthwhile instituting in the future is, like, besides increasing the publicity of S&A, because it's very, not quite hidden, but I've been in student government for a decent time, one of the longer serving senators, and I still didn't know what it did until I got here. Besides improving the publicity, I think it might be worthwhile implementing some kind of system for public comment. And obviously a lot of the problems with public comment this time were due to the virtual modality, but I think it could be useful to, like, in the same way that we got emails coming in, opening, I know that PBAC has a similar system where they have people submit concerns or information or whatever ahead of time. Just that way to, it streamlines it for the committee to receive the public comment that way. and it allows people to get their voice out without, being blindsided and coming there the day of and having to clamor among others to make themselves heard.
So as I'm making my note, Bjorn, just to clarify, with the increased ability for public comment, you're really talking about electronic public comment in advance. And are you talking about the deliberation, not necessarily each of the individual meetings, or both?
Honestly,
but making like because it's available, but making it as a systemic, like we're telling people, here's how you can provide public comment. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, it seems like it would be good to have it on a systemic level, although it's most important for any deliberative meetings rather than just the presentations. Definitely. And I guess it's important, especially as we recover from the pandemic, to have online options to provide it so that, say, you don't have to show up at the meeting to have your voice heard, I guess.
All right, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so that actually, I didn't think about that because I'm, thinking about the base funding and that process, and especially that last day and all the public comments that just flooded in all day long, and how that was influencing maybe or affecting us in some ways, because they weren't always nice comments, and that in a regular meeting there's today we are open for public comment when we started. That closes. There's no opportunity for people to keep throwing stuff at us as we are talking or deliberating. And then at the end of the meeting, there's a place. But that base funding, man, it was just flying all day long. And I think that if we're ever back on Zoom for base funding, knock on wood, we will, next time it won't be, it will be back in the big boardroom, and it will be very different, probably a situation. But that I think was a problem in how that was so open to that. But also I didn't think about it, because next time, what we've learned by all of this is that students on the west side, students that are on campus that can engage with us, it's really great. So to have that ability to have comment, but I think controlled in the way it always is for all the other meetings. This is the first time I've seen it so out of control. So just a thought.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, one thing I also, basically an open question is the 9-hour deliberation mandatory? I mean, I know that it was previously a flat 9 hours, and this time it was 3 and then 6. I just worry that wears us down over time, even with bio breaks. And I can't speak for all of you, but I felt like it was much more difficult to keep myself, straight and adhering to guidelines and, parsing everything properly as the hours wore on. Of course, there is a time crunch because, like, we finish listening and then we start deliberating. So that is hard to work out.
When I think we've already started segueing into this, but I want to at least formally say it so people who maybe are waiting, is what recommendations do you have either for next year's committee? And again, keep in mind, next year's committee is not going to be doing base funding. So they're going to be hearing mostly supplemental other things. What recommendations do you have for next year's committee? Or mostly what I've been already jumping into is what recommendations do you have for the next base funding process when that comes about?
Well, and I'd like to jump in a little bit. I think even if you guys can put it in writing too, so if there's anything that pops up, in the next few weeks, I think would be awesome to have it. And I know sometimes it's easier to formulate your, recommendations kind of in writing. So if you do want to do that, feel free to either email Joey or I, and we can compile that and then maybe share it at our next meeting.
Go ahead, Bjorn.
Yeah, I know I'm kind of barraging y'all with points, but I did spend a long time thinking about this and losing sleep over this. one thing that I thought was worth making clear was the role of faculty in this, because like, I'm very happy that the student money was allocated by students, and it feels really empowering to me. But I also feel a little bit bad for the faculty who got to sit through the presentations and then and they asked questions and all that, but then they had to abstain out of a responsibility type of thing. And I wanted to ask, like, do the S&A guidelines and procedures outline how that's supposed to go? Because I don't know anything about it, and I guess it would probably be better for me to ask the faculty if they're comfortable, faculty and staff, to say how that is. I'm not against it, but I guess I want to figure out how to standardize it.
So I mean, I'll jump in here, but I mean, from my understanding is that there has been, in the history of this committee, that I understand that there's been years where I believe that the committee has instructed the faculty to not to abstain, and other years they've voted. And so kind of going into it and everything that was going on at the moment, I mean, I didn't feel like anybody said I couldn't vote, but I just, by abstaining the whole time felt good to me, because it's your money and allowing the students to make the call. So, for me, it was a good choice, but I don't know what everybody else is on it.
Go ahead, Terry.
Actually, Bjorn, this kind of segues into something that I was going to suggest, and that's actually that I think you could remove the faculty and staff off of this committee and replace it really with elected students. And that way, I think, and this is true of all university committees. It's always really hard to get people to serve on committees. Whether you are faculty or students, really it is. I don't think that you guys really need the faculty and staff. I think you're really quite capable of doing this, this process by yourselves. But I think that it's really important that you have representation from all of the groups that are involved. And I think that probably the best way to do that is to have elected representatives. So you could have, the online students could elect somebody, because again, according to, the guidelines, you're supposed to have, I think it's college and online and non-traditional. And so you could have these groups elect people, and then you would have, good representation across that. And then those people will be voting, because, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have people sitting through, hours and hours of deliberations just hitting abstain. It's not a good use of anybody's time. And unfortunately, especially from a student perspective, you're paying for faculty and staff time. You don't want us sitting there doing that. You want us sitting there, doing other things. And I think that if you replaced that with more general representation and elected, if you had people that were elected, they would really be interested in doing it. And then they would also be responsible to go back to those groups that they were elected from and be representative of them and get the information that they needed for that. And so that would actually be my suggestion.
Any other comments?
I think the only other thing I'd say is, again, this isn't a one and done. I just want to make sure, because I knew we had time this week to give us the chance to talk through this. Again, I'd appreciate if each of you on the committee can take time And again, some of it may be things I've already said, and so I don't want you to feel the need to repeat all of that. But if you have additional thoughts on any of those questions, to send them, because I do every year compile all these together as an annual self-assessment that we look at and keep, but also it helps to inform when we get to the recommendations, especially a base funding year like this. Those are the recommendations that I bring forward in the fall when we do training for the new committee, talking about here's what we're looking at, or here's where it is, and that we'll talk about with Joffrey as we're prepping for the year. But especially those base funding years, given that there's not really a foreseeable way that we would have any representation from this year's committee who will be here serving on the committee in 4 years when this comes up again. So it is helpful and keep track of all of that, because you all have the experience and have sat through this. So I do appreciate your thoughtfulness and your feedback.
There we go. Josh, I see your hand up.
I just want to make it clear from my standpoint that I've enjoyed being on this committee. I haven't thought once that it was maybe a waste of time, even if I'm clicking abstain, because I'm engaging with students, learning about the issues that are important to each of you and about these requests that are coming forward. I do think Bjorn, your question is a good one about, should we abstain or should we not? Well, there's nothing in the policy that says we have to abstain. I think we do that from personal choice. And there are some things that I do vote on, and there's some things that I abstain from. And so for the base funding, I kind of made a statement that I abstained for most things because I do think this is student money, student choice. But if there's a split or a need for some additional votes to go one way or the other, I'm happy to jump in and do that. But outside of that, I've really enjoyed every meeting I've attended with all of you. I think you're all super thoughtful in how you're thinking about spending your money, students' money, representing the whole student body and how you do that. And it enriches me. Sometimes I have to hold my kid in the evening, which is a benefit that I get now. When we go back on campus, I might not be able to do that as much, but I still enjoy the time that I have here. And I think it helps me be a better faculty or staff member at the university, being part of the committee.
Yeah, Sean, I see your hand up.
I figured I'd say something since every other faculty or staff member said something, but I was put in a different position too, where I came in the very middle of all of this, and Joey and Lacey did a great job of onboarding me, but I don't know if you can prepare yourself ever for a 9-hour deliberation like we had, and trying to figure out what all the different organizations coming in with their presentations and the numbers and crunching all that. So it was definitely a fire hose experience for me. I think I've already expressed that. But I think my position is really unique to, number one, COVID, right? Number two, during base funding. And so I had reached out and I had asked questions about stances on the faculty side. And I think it's been said that ultimately, at least my decision was that it is up to the students, and we'll give guidance and do what we can and give some experience. But in my case, I had little experience, honestly, with this committee, just based on where I was. So I was really impressed with all of you students that had made the decisions you did, the way you talked about them. Some of what both Terry has said and others have said, I think they're valid points, and I think it's something to take into consideration, and how the faculty play a role in this in the future. But I think, overall, it's, regardless of who's involved, it's a big task, right? And so I think just understanding that, and then if we can communicate that to everybody else, what kind of task that is, I don't think they truly understand until they see it. That's when I think it'll probably be most effective.
Are there any more comments? Go ahead, Bjorn.
This really has been a lot of me talking. I do apologize. Well, one thing I was talking to a few people who basically told me, do you guys have a rubric? And I said, yeah, we have a rubric. And they were like, why didn't you go through it item by item? And I was like, I looked like that Muppet who's like, and using the rubric so intensely is kind of, I mean, it would be brutal, but I did have people raise concerns about how empirical the deliberation was. I personally felt it was pretty decently structured. On the other hand, there is the question of, is it possible to be objective here? And I think it's kind of be as objective as possible. That was something that's been bothering me that I promised I would, reflect on and ask people to reflect on, so.
Any more comments? All right, seeing none. Joey, is there anything else you wanted to add to this section?
Nope. I mean, I think if there are others, I'm not planning on having us have a full open discussion like this at the next 2 meetings. But if you all do have feedback, we can bring it up at those ones. But again, anyone who wants to submit things, especially again, knowing this is an open public meeting and it is recording all those, I understand if people didn't want to give their feedback in this venue. So please definitely make use of that form and submitting those. And again, I'll compile them all without names obviously associated, but as one large piece for the committee to look at in the future. So thank you all very much. That's all I got, Christian.
All right, with that, let's move on to new business. And that is a supplemental request from Student Legal Services of the ASCWU. And I do see our dear President Mikhail. Will you be presenting for us today?
Yes.
All right, whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for having me. I do really have to reiterate that there's a reason why this committee won that ASCWU Student Committee of the Year award. Just with everything that you all said, we really value all your leadership this year, especially this year, despite the circumstances. Before I share my screen, I'm going to send a file in the chat, and it's a one sheet that kind of goes over the main points that I'll be discussing. I think you might have gotten an email with it, but it's a little easier to digest than me talking at y'all for 10 minutes, hopefully a little under, because let's breeze through it. Lacey or Joey, am I able to share my screen by any chance?
You should be now, Mikhail. I just updated it. Let me make sure.
Yep, I got it. I think so. Can y'all see my screen? I'm gonna hopefully play slideshow, and can y'all see the bigger?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not. We can see the slides on the side.
Okay, I'm just gonna roll with that then, because I don't want to have to figure that stuff out. So again, my name is Mikhail, he, his pronouns, and I'm the current student body president only for about 5 weeks. Not that I'm counting, and I am requesting for a new resource called CWU Student Legal Services. So I kind of talk through it. Dean Gregory Heinzelman is here with me as my mentor and advisor, and he'll help field some of the questions from the administrative side once we get there. So a quick overview. Student Legal Services, or SLS, would be a free legal advice resource to any enrolled student who is enrolled in at least 1 credit and has paid the S&A fee at CWU. So bar certified lawyers within Ellensburg, or honestly even throughout the state of Washington, would be billed for their hours and would be paid through the S&A fee in exchange for giving students basic legal advice. So some examples of legal advice offered by this resource, which is typically seen at other higher ed institutions. And I did rank them in order of what I believe would be the most beneficial for our demographic of students. So that first one would be immigration. Second one, landlord and tenant disputes, protection orders. wills and powers of attorney, name and gender marker changes, criminal cases, discrimination, divorce, traffic tickets, auto collisions, and insurance. And honestly, the list goes on, but it really varies depending on which bar certified lawyer we choose to put out that RFQ and fully implement with this source. One important disclaimer that I have a feeling that especially all of our faculty and admin might ask is that the main distinction with this resource is that the lawyer would be consulting with students and would not be able to provide litigation against the university, which I know is an issue at other institutions. So I really wanted to highlight that. And that would be placed in a contract with the bar certified lawyer. SLS also provides legal advice, which is completely different than legal representation. So if a student is consulting with the lawyer and they decide that there's representation needed, that student would have to either contact a different lawyer or outside of student legal services, outside of the university, hire the lawyer that we are using to represent them in the court, but it will not be using student funds for that. And an intake form, which would adhere to FERPA and all those fun confidentiality agreements, would be required and vetted by the office. Peggy's here. It would probably be vetted by Peggy because she's amazing, vetted by the Office of the Dean of Student Success. And again, student legal services would be completely confidential, which is really part and parcel to the attorney-client relationship. There's a bunch of great opportunities and points of collaboration and efficiencies that we could implement with this resource. So one of the great ones is that we would have a bar certified lawyer on our campus, whether that's virtual or physical, pending the future. We could have them work directly with our students and give them firsthand experience, knowledge, and mentorship, which is huge here. So if you're looking at our undergraduate law and justice program, we also have a master's of science in law and justice program where this bar certified lawyer could really work to connect with our students within those programs and serve as a mentor or a guidee, even when it's discussing LSAT, law school options, what that process looked like for our students. This bar certified lawyer could also develop closer relationships with other lawyers within the county and help give us that network, those connections needed, because those relationships would be cultivated through this lawyer. And the last part is that we've, in the past, Justice for Our Neighbors, which is called JFON, has worked with our Diversity and Equity Center to hold pro bono law clinics. And we could potentially use, with our relationship with this lawyer or lawyers, provide similar services on our campus and work directly with our students to get legal advice. Workshop opportunities are also a great option with getting large groups of students to do a one and done workshop and provide them just to get the name of the lawyer and this resource, especially because it would be brand new to our campus out there. So cost is the tricky part. So this cost is a max set estimate of $20,000 from the S&A supplemental budget. And the reason why it is an estimate and why I don't have the breakdown is because before we could hire the lawyer, we would put out what's called an RFQ or a request for quotation to really set what the actual cost would look like, because it does vary per attorney, and it also varies per the area. So this was set back Stuart Thompson from Business and Financial Services and Contracts, all that fun stuff. And I have communicated with what steps are necessary to implement this service. And he said before we move forward with finding an exact price, we would need to put out an RFQ, but we would, of course, need money to put out that RFQ, which is why I'm coming forth before I have that exact number. And the 20,000 would be used throughout the whole academic year next year. So it would be split by billable hours that the lawyer or lawyers work and actually have consultations with students. In the future, I think we would really look into the potential for continuous base funding. Obviously, we just finished this quadrennial cycle, so we would wait depending on how well this service and how well students are receptive to this service before that conversation starts. And yeah, so metrics of need. So Brandon's awesome survey that he really championed earlier in winter quarter. One of the great questions that was asked, and I think was great because it was really strategic in getting student input that we're taking This survey there was 2 questions asked, and it was student legal services. If this resource was implemented on our campus, how often would you use it? And then the second question was, on a scale of 1 through 10, how essential would you rate student legal services, with 10 being the best? And I was able to pull the data and put it into a chart that kind of shows how often our students would use it, but also how many students think this would be an essential resource to them on our campus. And this was based off of 340 student respondents to each of these questions. And I believe I sent the numbers in a graph to Joey and Lacey, who I believe sent it to you all. But if you all need this, I can get it to you. And the last part is just going over the fact that we have other partner institutions within the state of Washington that have already implemented this service. And I'm willing to bet that any faculty member, professional staff here can vouch for that and say that they've either worked at an institution or they've attended an institution as an undergrad or graduate student that has had a similar service like student legal services. So our partners at WSU have theirs fully ran by their student government, so that students have the most autonomy with that service and are really working closely with that. UW also has a lot of similar features to what we would see as useful on our campus, and Western also has something similar as well. I believe Eastern has something as well, but I would have to double check. But we know that our other institutions have this resource, so it's me requesting in front of you all to see if we can close our gap and need for this resource for legal advice on our campus to best support our student body. And I'm just going to go ahead and yield to questions. I'm going to stop sharing first. That's fair. Okay.
Bjorn, go ahead.
To clarify, you were just planning to hire one attorney, right?
Well, it really depends. Honestly, so like that number, that max 20,000 per year, we've had conversations where we could hire 2 like very, very part-time lawyers, right? Like one could work Fridays for 2 hours and have drop-in hours, and one could work Wednesdays. It really all depends on the lawyers that actually bid for the RFQ. So it's really dependent. And we've also had conversations where there could be specialized lawyers. So like one specifically works with immigration cases, one specifically works with domestic violence, IPV, whatever it may be. So sorry, there's just not one exact question or answer to your question. It all depends.
No, it's all good. I completely understand. That's just building up to basically me wondering how many, the survey told us how many students would utilize it at a certain interval. I'm just wondering about how supply of lawyer time is going to measure up against demand. And obviously we have not a real idea of that yet. So
yeah, I think that's definitely a valid feeling. Like next year will definitely be kind of like the pilot program, right? Let's gather more data. And next year, student government can come back and either increase the request or decrease it, depending on the results of how effective this resource would be.
It looks like there's a question in the comment section, so let me read it out loud for you. I could be wrong, but my understanding was that if another institution had gone through the RFP/RFQ process and awarded the service, we could tag off of that without going out to bid. Was this something you looked into or something that our contracts office suggested?
And Greg.
So yeah, that is, when you go through the state RFP or RFQ process, as this would be, we could piggyback on that contract. Now that's dependent upon whether or not that contract meets the needs that we would define for our student population that we serve. And I would assume at some level, the majority of those services at the 3 other institutions would be in compliance with that.
Terry, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I don't really have a question, but I just have a suggestion. And this is just because a friend of mine in the College of Business, Nancy Pigeon, is a lawyer, and she has been doing this work pro bono for a very long time. And so my suggestion would just be to go and ask her what her suggestions would be. And I would, you know, guess that the law and justice people also, so I would, you know, bounce it off of those faculty members who've been used to doing this. Because like one of the things I noticed on your list that I know just from talking to Nancy previously is DWIs, DUIs is another big topical area.
Prof G is my faculty advisor for the human resource specialization, so I'll definitely connect with her.
The hope, Terry, as well would be that we document the topic of legal support or legal advice. That way we have a better understanding after year one or first quarter, second quarter of services of what students really have a need for in relationship to legal advice and perspective.
Are there any more questions? Bjorn, go ahead.
I just learned what pro bono means like 5 minutes ago. But for the pro bono services, like working with students in the L&J program, would that be negotiated in the contract, or would it be something separate?
I don't think so. I think so. A lot of the time, pro bono is essentially the lawyer volunteering to do X, Y, Z. So whether that is holding like a law clinic or like holding workshops and or individual sessions outside of student legal services appointments.
Any other questions? Let me check the chat. All right, seeing none. Thank you for your presentation, Mikhail. If we have any other questions, we'll reach out to you. We'll vote on this next week. So thank you guys for coming. All right. Oh, wait. Hold on. There we go. Okay. My screen just got a little frizzy all of a sudden. All right. So up next, I'll have a second call for public comment. Any thoughts or comments?
I'll go ahead and say it. Greg put it into the chat a little bit ago, but I want to officially document it as public comment, that the juried undergraduate student art and design exhibition coming up will take place on Thursday, May 6th. And there's a link in there to register in advance for the Zoom webinar. So just making sure you all saw that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Bjorn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this was something I just remembered that I wanted to commend us on, and specifically I want to commend Brandon on. The survey was so important this year, and I hope we can continue it for, especially for next base funding things. The other thing was that, Brandon, I love your cat, was that 2 Thursdays from this Thursday, on the 20th at 5 p.m. I'm hosting an event designed to basically talk to anybody who is interested in student leadership on campus, be that official or unofficial positions. It's a short talk by me and discussion, and 5 p.m. Thursday, May 20th, and I will provide my Zoom link in the chat, but I'll also send out a flyer later.
Thanks for the heads up, Bjorn. I see Greg's hands up.
Yeah, I have a short public comment from Eunice because he's not here. We know Eunice always likes to make a public comment. And Eunice just wants to say that he loves all of us. So thank you very much.
I forgot all about this reaction, by the way. All right, any other comments, any questions? Bjorn, I see your hand up.
I also got a comment from Messina, who is super busy today. She said one thing that was super helpful was how the committee worked to bring her up to speed as we moved into winter, because she had to miss fall quarter.
Any other comments? Let me check the chat. Oh, nope, that was already read. All right, seeing none, can I entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Motion by Brandon. Any second? I saw Greg's fingers up, so he'll second that. And the motion passes. All right. Have a nice night, everybody.
Night,
Have a
everyone.
great evening all.
Yeah, see you next week.